Greetings, rapidly aging youths. This is internet personality Vangelus, and don't worry, those creases manifesting on your face are just the destiny of leadership forcing itself upon you. Unrelated to that, this is a review of MDLX Rodimus Prime, provided to me for coverage by manufacturer ThreeZero. Once again, ThreeZero art director Kelvin Tsao has come up with his own aesthetic take on another classic Transformers character, skipping the hot rod step to head straight into the haggard maturity of Rodimus Prime. This is also the first MDLX figure to absolutely and directly interact with a previous release, so if you have ThreeZero's Optimus Prime, get ready for callback interaction! First off, let's define the Rodimal phenotypes presented in this rendition of the turbo-revving middle-aged punk. He's an orange and burgundy Rodimus type with the black Cavalier boot motif in his color layout. Yeah, I know, that's usually the case once he's primed up, but I still believe there's room in this universe, in all the universes, for a magenta-leaning Matrix bearer. MDLX Rodimus leans into the presence of his predictable back fin by including similar dynamic fin-type pieces on his shoulders and forearms. I like the aerofoiled turbodynamic vibe of the sculpt, which boldens and magnifies the inherently opposite nature that he has to his predecessor, Box Truck Dadman. Clean flame tampograph aside, MDLX Rodimus Prime rocks the kind of advanced paintwork one expects from a ThreeZero piece, mixing matte and gloss finishes with clean lines and deep recess shading. If anything, one almost wishes there was more panel lining to break up some of the larger orange patches, as they stick out a little bit compared to the more complex, darker areas that surround them. It's hand swap discussion time, and as tends to be the case, we begin with a matching pair of fists. You've been looking at them for the entire video so far. They can pop off, which I can confirm to be a solid and non-scary hand swap process, which leads us to the next pair of hands, curvy and splayed open hands that match the inherent zazz of a Rodimus type. The next pair of hands are where things start to get kinda specific. These gripping hands, these ones, are meant to hold the included laser blaster accessory, and only that accessory, not the other one. That other gun, the blaster rifle, goes with this pair of hands, as its grip shape is slightly different. Maybe a little pedantic, but this set of hands also runs double duty for holding the matrix of leadership that came with MDLX Optimus Prime. Basically, one pair has one finger extended, the other pair has two fingers extended. There are also two orphan and unique left-hand options, one for pointing at a guy who's reached the end of the road, and the other for pointing at a guy who's got one thumb and a whole lot of riz, or, giving a thumbs up. Do you think Rodimus has Riz, or am I overestimating here? Finally, you get a pair of hands for two different figures. One is for Rodimus, and one is for Optimus, and both are made to dock with one another to perform the handshake of leadership. My first reaction was, why aren't these a single sculpted piece with two wrist connections? But they fit together well, and being separate parts does mean there's room for even more handshake partners in future. We touched on these before, but Rodimus does include two weapons, a laser blaster and a blaster rifle, both proper nouns. However, you can also yank a part off to slam both guns together into a photon eliminator rifle, which is pretty cool as a physical callback to the entire Hot Rod and Rodimus weapons suite. However, the peg involved in this process is extremely tight on mine, to the point of making me want to widen both of its receiving holes slightly. It feels like it could form a peg-snapping vacuum as it is out of the box, so take care, and at the very least, be ready to lubricate before insertion. In fact, instead of lubing or widening the holes, I just carefully scraped the paint off the peg. That seemed to solve the issue for the most part, so hey, no gloop or hole stretching was necessary. I'm gonna start using some shorthand on MDLX articulation, so please do check out Bumblebee, Optimus Prime, and Megatron if you feel like I am not explaining fully how some of these mechanisms work, although, you know what a ball socket joint is? He's got one at the base of his head and at the base of his neck. There's two of them, so you can Roxbury out, as Rodimus was always meant to. You can kind of go have you considered riding on my spaceship? But the jargon really begins with the double ball barbell connection between his arm and his chest at the shoulder. This means that you have ranges of motion within the chest and at the shoulder, and this means you can reposition the axis a little bit. Also, the base of the shoulder where his double ball barbell connects can move outwards for a bit of butterfly action to reveal a bit of sculpting behind this fin. And then at the base of the shoulder connection in the arm, there's also a dedicated hinge. But then, oh, what are we going to do about this thing? The Rodimus shoulder syndrome. Well, you fold it up, and now it all works. I'm very pleased with that. This one moves a little bit more smoothly than this one, I find. But they both have like a slight kind of soft, like, click going on. This one's just a bit more heavy in its click. So between that and the hinge and the ball socket, you can T-pose a Rodimus without immediate risk of paint scratch. You can still scratch paint if you get carried away, but it's an assembly of mechanisms that make me quite pleased, along with the bicep swivel. Now, this is all going to be a bit complicated. There is a double hinge elbow, right? The bicep swivel is between the two hinges. There's also this thing, which can kind of bump and scrape against stuff if you're not too careful. However, if you want to get careful, this thing's also on its own ball socket connection that allows it to point outwards almost specifically so you can keep it out of the way while you're doing all this stuff and then fold it back down. You can even have it, like, you know, point up or down a bit if you want to more so reveal the forearm pipes. So be aware of that. This has some also paintware paint apps on it, as I should say, battle damage paint apps. Basically, they edged these things in silver such that I briefly thought, uh-oh, I chipped it, but that seems to actually just be paint because this is plastic, it's not a metal piece. Also, the wrists are on little double ball barbell connections, as a lot of the MDLX wrists are, where the top ball is a lot more flexible than the bottom ball, but you have the, you know, that wiggly wrist ability going on. Hey, this is Emergency Vangelus here in emergency sound quality. A little thing I should point out from the instructions that I forgot about, so I'm gonna use my pain to educate you. The elbows. Since the bicep swivel is between the two elbow joints, there is a point where when you bend the lower elbow, you actually can't swivel the bicep inward past about this point. If you force it or forget what's happening or just grind stuff together, you'll get a little paint chip like the one you can see right there. That ugly little speck right there is some red paint that ground off because this thing was either bent or I was attempting to bend it whilst it was in this position. As you can see, it starts hitting the immobile, very cornered upper chunk where that upper elbow joint resides. So be aware of that. And be careful with the elbows when you're posing this guy. The huge amount of shoulder range partially, I think, is there as a sort of secondary bicep joint, so consider it as such. There is also a ball socket joint within the torso. This allows for a bit of side-to-side rocking, a whole lot more forward rocking, to reveal some spinal cord de la orange. Or get a peek of that crossbar underboob, a really low underboob. But the unique thing with Rodimus is he also has these details, you know, that tend to be on Rodimus designs. They're both ball socketed, and they just kind of wiggle. And I think it's mostly to allow room for you to tilt them like side to side at that joint. They feel weird though. And I generally don't manipulate them on purpose. I just let them do whatever they do, and if they seem out of place, I push them back into place. Luckily, the waist joint is just a simple cut. I really like this pattern with MDLX right now, where it's like, here's the complicated joint, and then if you just want to twist a waist, just twist a waist. And if you just want to flare some hip skirts, you have side ones, you have forward ones, and you even got some back ones, so that you can fully free up space to manipulate the double ball barbell connection each leg has to the groin. And in short, that basically means it's a ball socket connection where you can take the axis, you can pull it down in a Fig Arts style, but you can also do the same thing in other axes, like pulling it a bit forward, a little bit backward. And this lets you give yourself whatever clearance you need to not have to work with the skirts so much. The skirts are more of an ancillary thing than a main thing to worry about, because then you can, you know, lower it down to kick forward. The skirt only has to come up that far, as opposed to trying to make the skirt come up even farther to kick forward from an upper main double barbell bald axis. The thigh swivel is actually within the top of this whole assembly, so it is easier to mess with if you do move the double barbell axis down a little bit. Axis down a little bit. Anyway, let's stop saying that word for a little while to just show there's also double-hinged knees. They reveal mechanical detail as they go. It's, once again, that really neat, affordable version of linkage articulation, where it's mostly visual, but it still looks pretty dang cool when you're doing it. And then down here, much like on Megatron or Optimus Prime, there is a big piece of the boot sculpt that's actually a ball-socketed piece that can pivot and wiggle on a ball-socket connection. In order to accommodate, we're already back to it again, the double ball barbell connection between the lower leg and the ankle. So you can change if the foot's a little bit more forward, a little bit more backward, a little bit more side to side, without tilting it before you then start tilting it, and etc. So it's very manipulatable. Again, this is a lot of ball joint math, so it's actually quite feasible to get a little overwhelmed if you don't know how all the mechanisms work. And there's also a toe joint, as one might expect. Pretty solid articulation all around, and what's cool is not once during filming, even with all those cuts, did this piece fall off. I have actually knocked this piece off of his back, messing with the toy idly more than messing with it in the nervous filming setup. So be aware, if you move the arms backwards too much and don't realize they're gonna bap into the fin, then you might, you know, fulcrum it off of its little tab connection. The fin does not have any joints in it whatsoever. It just plugs in there. So be aware. Rodimus is the fourth major release in the MDLX line and represents some exciting potential to me. For one, he's not from the usual Evergreen 6 Transformers, he's not even from pre-86 Generation 1, but also he features a more realized minor accessory play pattern than MDLX Megatron, and callback interactions to MDLX Optimus Prime. Basically, he's the first milestone step towards making MDLX feel like a full-scale action figure series rather than a handful of shared aesthetic collector toys. A small but important evolution of the line's status quo, in my opinion. Anyway, this has been Internet Personality Vangelus, and yes, I absolutely want to see a matching MDLX Galvatron sooner than later. I know we've got more early G1 fare incoming, from Seekers to Lambo Bro, but Season 3 is my favorite part of the G1 nostalgia well, and I want to see it take the line by storm. In the meantime, the fine Patreon patrons and YouTube membership members, along with doses of dosh from coffee, all keep me forever young and ready to rock. I just gotta do something about this shoulder ache. You know how it is, you go to sleep, your body moves, something breaks. Oh god, I'm so tired.